And you're listening to Heart of Mind Radio for the new millennium. And for those of you who would like to connect deeper into this program, then you can always check out the website heartofmindradio.com. I am in studio with Aracely Brown. Hello, Aracely.
Hey there, Kathy.
It's always good to speak to you. Yes, so welcome. Aracely Brown is one of the program directors at the New York Open Center in New York City. And we have been friends for quite a long time, it seems.
When was that, 2006?
Something like that. It's been a little while. And we went on a trip to Mexico together.
Yes, we did.
With the Open Center.
I broke my foot at that time.
Yes,
but
sadly.
you enjoyed the rest of the trip because
it was a great trip with
curanderismo training.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is because, that training has had a great impact on my life as well as my healing technologies and the tools that I have access to. So it makes a great difference to understand what it is because we're going to be talking about altars, building
that's
sacred
right. And you climb some of the largest ones in the world.
Yeah, the pyramids.
Palenque, was it Palenque or Teotihuacan?
Teotihuacan, yeah. Mm-hmm. I sat with a sisterhood on the top of that pyramid. It was wonderful. I have a picture of that from that moment.
I need to see that because
yeah, you didn't make it up to the top, but it's a wonderful place. And actually, this summer I am working on a trip to Belize.
Ooh,
because they also have ancient pyramids there.
That's right.
Mayan pyramids.
They're not talked about too often.
Yeah, they're less well known, and hence the reason I want to go there. Mm-hmm. Because when I go to these sites, I can. If they're not too heavily populated with visitors, I can pick up a lot of the energies there.
You should actually film it.
Yeah, I may very well do that. And I actually have had several, a couple of years ago, I was offering a fundraising premium, which was about going to this same pyramid that we visited and doing these ceremonies and stuff. And it was interesting. While I was watching the video, I kind of went into a vision in which I was there, but not as myself, but as like an ancient Indian watching the group. It was interesting. That all came as a result
That's a tough past life regression right there.
Yeah. So it was interesting for me, and I have a very strong connection to the Americas. Mm. And I've done some studying with the African traditions, with the Dagara people and the Dogon people. The Dagara through Melodoma Somé, and the way he would do it, he would do a huge ritual around, and I would say an altar space that we would build. So it worked with the seasons. So you would, at a certain time of year, it would be earth that would be dominant. Another time of year, it would be fire that would be dominant. But the altar space was really built based on the elements, which is very much like what the Americas, the traditions of the
Yeah.
Americas. They're very similar.
They're very indigenous.
There are different cultural influences, and they're entirely, I won't say entirely different cultures, but the manifestation of their cultures do have particular differences. But when you look down into the content of the spiritual teachings, there is a lot of crossover.
Wow.
And you see the same thing when you go to the Celtic traditions, when you see Stonehenge and things like that. And a lot of these earthenworks are built according to the same systems. They're built in alignment with the earth and with the celestial systems in terms of their location and their construct. So there's this ancient wisdom.
Well, yeah, because I think that they decided spiritually to key into the language of nature and spirit, and nature spoke back.
Right.
And said, this is how this is supposed to work. So it really works for you, and it helps you, and it heals you. And if you continue to connect with us, being us nature, be it the animals, be it the plants, you will be prosperous with nature.
Right.
So that's where I feel.
So that you begin to live your life in harmony.
Right, and that's why they're still around, those temples, the stories. They haven't disappeared. You know, I was watching this morning on some show, a travel show, and they said, well, who are the oldest people on this continent? They said the Maasai. They said, and how long have they been here? They said, since the beginning of time. And they said, they only make 2% of the people, but they're iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, and what about the fact that the beasts of the animals that could kill them are on the same land? And they said, isn't that dangerous for them? They said, no, they have a language. The Maasai see them, and they see the Maasai, and they know that they should stay away from each other, and they walk in the other direction. And it's a respect.
Well, I do believe that there is a way in which we can recultivate these ancient gifts and talents in our lives. And I see it also from a spiritual perspective. Like I do, most of my work is done in the field of energy and vibration. Mm-hmm. And so when I work with energy, when I work with, say, building an altar, or I work with ceremonies, or I work with certain practices, I see that maintenance of a certain vibrational frequency puts you in that realm where you're not going to come into contact with certain kinds of conflicts, or that you'll have a bit of an edge with certain kinds of energies that might otherwise interfere with what's happening with you, with your own energy field, with your body. And really the part of healing that I work with is the part that is vibrational. So if you have an organ that is diseased, it's functioning at a very low vibrational field.
Yep.
And as you begin to cleanse out that whatever the physical debris is, and lift your vibrational field, there isn't the same kind of cohesion with the dysfunction and the illness, because your body is functioning at a vibrational field within which that particular illness can't exist. So, for instance, if you are a person who is overwhelmingly living with grief, that's a certain vibration that's going to impact certain organs, the lungs particularly, and the organs and systems of the lungs.
Yeah, because it takes on, isn't the kidneys too?
Yeah, and the kidneys. So, and it takes on that vibration and makes you more susceptible.
Because the Chinese believe
to disease.
that
There's
mourning.
an energy. Yeah.
Those are the organs that, and when you're in mourning or grief, those organs take that on.
Yeah, and so there's a real connection to our vibrational signature and the state of our health, the state of our mind, the state of our emotions. So from my perspective, the ancient people knew how to create vibrational field for the whole community, for their whole civilization, and for their whole societies. And a lot of what we look back on as myth or some kind of superstition were actually mechanisms that ancient people understood about the realities and how they could maintain themselves in their societies. And then when the clash of cultures occurred over time, a lot of these societies lost that understanding. But it still comes through. It still bleeds through into our current time frame.
Well, you said a magic word. You said in the community. And one of the things that strikes me is that the reason that they were able to maintain that is because they were watching out for each other. They were taking care of themselves as a group. And I think that the ones that came that were maybe diseased are ones that function from mostly ego and self. They don't function from community or support or caretaking or any of that. So when you lose that, it's when you do begin to establish more disease. And in cities now, that like New York, there's a lot of that situation where there's this aloneness, and there's more likelihood of sadness and lost and no recognition. So people get lost as single, alone people. The community has a power because you mirror each other, you see each other, you have likes and dislikes. So it helps you become, it keeps you protected in some ways. So this is, it's a disease on its own.
Well, that's an interesting thought. And I think from what you're saying, there's the upside and downside of the community, because we live in communities sometimes that are very toxic, and they propagate toxic thoughts, toxic behaviors, this idea that somehow we have to self-judge and self-blame. So there are a lot of things that are community-based that are not
those
healthy.
Communities, though, a lot of times I feel that they have a leader who is toxic and now has basically diseased to believe. It's almost like a cult. That kind of ego thinking, that's what ruins it. When everyone is generous within the group, then that's what protects it. The minute that other piece comes in is when I think that ego, one person, that's when it starts to damage.
It starts to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a little sense to me. I guess you're looking at it from the perspective of you have basically a healthy community, and then some foreign psychology enters into it based on ego, and sort of that ego-based person.
Well, a lot of the Native American who existed as a group on this continent, and then all of a sudden you see conquerors come in, and it's boom, this kind of annihilation control. That becomes, whereas they were more of a peace. They had wars and whatever, but it was still more of a land culture.
It was a land culture, and there was a level of humanity to it. So you would go to war if you had a conflict, but you didn't try to genocide the other people.
That's a good thing.
You would incorporate them into your community.
Right.
And okay, so they'd have to change their philosophy or whatever, but the base of the understanding was common enough that they understood that they were dealing with their brethren on some level, that they were related. Everything was related to themselves, including the land, including the animals, including each other. So it's a way of understanding reality that I believe is true reality, and what we're living in these days is more of a false construct. They call it the Matrix, but it's a false construct, and we get trapped in it by virtue of the programming of our own minds, and we become our own jailers after a while with our thoughts. Well, I should have done that. I shouldn't have done that. I did this wrong. I owe this person this much. I didn't treat my parents right, or I have to, so we get all this mental construct of sharp guidelines that it's almost impossible to meet. And we lose touch with our body and our feelings and our emotions and our heart connection and our sense of compassion for self and others. And you can't really live a full life, in the absence of having compassion within your life, I think. You need that. We need that so that we can not crucify ourselves, such as it is, and really have some understanding of the human condition, and that we can love ourselves and love each other without this need for some kind of artificial perfection. Just understanding that we're human beings, and Sometimes we do well and sometimes we don't, but that doesn't change the sacred nature of what we are. Anyway, just some thoughts. So we're having this conversation, I guess, because...
Well, I wanted to talk to you, most likely, because I'm here to draw you out, Kathy. Just because I want to talk about Kathryn in the way that your listeners don't always hear you, perhaps, because I don't know, also that since they've changed your time here, I just don't know. You have a whole new batch of people listening to you. And Kathryn is a master teacher of Qigong for over 30 years. You're a great energy healer, and you're a spiritual doula. You're certified in Reiki, and then in Sanlin technique. I mean, you've got what it takes to have so many years of practice and helping people. And you talk about also your connection to indigenous traditions, which strengthens your work even more. And I know that you've studied also with Sergio Magana, which is one of the lead people right now in the world for the Aztec tradition in Mexico. And he's also the one who protects the large pyramids worldwide with the UN. That's what he decided to do, which is unusual. It took this long. But you being connected to so many people of indigenous heart, and we talked about bringing you to the Open Center to do an evening so that you would have some time with people to work with the idea of what is the work of altar, having an altar in our lives. And the way that you're doing it, basically we've had many classes and people will talk, indigenous people will come in and they set up an altar in the room, and everybody brings a personal object, sets it in the room on the altar. And you're taught many techniques and thinking, and it's a full day and so on. But basically, being that we're all here in New York, you're basically going to come in and actually work it from another perspective, and that is, what do we do when we need to take this altar with us? It can't be just at home on my nice, bedroom altar, which we have. You want to teach people the understanding of it's not something that you have to leave at home, that it's something where you can go anywhere. You could travel, you could have your own particular and signature piece of an altar. You could also carry it to work. You could go anywhere and just become a person who takes, 10 minutes and says, I want to set this up in a private room somewhere, and I want to make sure that I feel more connected to spirit, because sometimes we need a visual connection. Some people also don't necessarily always respond to meditation, where you just close your eyes and zone out. In the Spanish tradition, and which I grew up in, mostly you have an altar, you have saints on it that represent something either from the Catholic tradition or another tradition, and you lead a life through that altar. Basically, it's about getting through pain, getting and persevering, and also visualizing, making things come true. There's a variety of aspects or goals that we work with by talking to spirit in this way. So one of the things is talking to spirit. Sometimes even just the statue that is sitting there on that altar, you feel like you need to do something like give them, in Spanish tradition, there's also, you give them food, some favorite food that you have.
In the African traditions also, you put food into them.
And also in Celtic, I understand that they do that. They would give them milk, something from the land that they would make, and then they would put it there. They talked more about elfin and fairies and so on, but it was there on the hearth. So that was their part of their altar, I think. So, but I want you to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things about altars, from my understanding, and it goes through the Bible and it goes through how many people actually practice their spirituality in cities, is how do they consecrate a connection with God or whomever they believe in that makes them feel whole, makes them feel like this is my spiritual identity, is something that I can actually focus on by doing this one thing in my life. Tell me more about it.
From my perspective, the altar space is you might consider it a realm or a portal. And it holds the energy, the vibration, the awareness, the consciousness of a particular vibrational field. So if you're a person that believes in the spirit of Yahshua or Jesus, you might want to bring that energy to your altar. Or if it's Mother Mary, you might want to bring that to your altar. Or if it's Ganesh, depending on your culture, you might want to bring that to the altar. But really what you're doing is you're creating a space, an homage to hold that energy. So that when you take your altar with you, maybe you want to put it on your desk at work, you would open that space, you lift the cover to that altar and allow that energy to have an influence into the vibration of your moment. So I used to use these altars in my workspace. When I worked in an office, I would create altars in that space because I didn't want anyone coming in with a negative energy vibration to be absorbed into my space or to be left there toxic to my energy field. So I would just create certain kinds of altars that were just there to maintain a higher vibration and to be able to absorb anything that was toxic that people brought into my office energetically. And so I was able to maintain a fairly clean space to the point that the people around me from all the other office spaces would come into my office as a sanctuary. And they would come in and say, I don't want anything. I just need to sit here for a few minutes and then I can go back out and deal with whatever I'm dealing with. And so an altar is like that. It's a sort of a concentrated connection to the sacred. And you can use it intermittently, or if you have it in your home, you might want to have an open altar that's always going to be there to influence the vibration and the energy of your space. But there may be certain altars that you want to open for certain purposes.
Right.
So if you are looking to connect to the sacred in yourself, which is more what I do, then I like having that concentrated space that reminds me of who I am, that reminds me that I am a spirit sacred being born into a physical reality that in which I have a name and a personality, but the essence of me is this greater self that has a more sacred divine connection to the source of all things, however one might think of that. So I like to get into that space where I could become the observer of my physical reality. So I could look at my life and I might be upset about this or troubled about that. But I don't stay in that space. I can move into the sacred part of me that can see it from a greater perspective and solve those problems from a greater perspective. And for me, an altar provides a gateway, if you will, to that part of me that has that expanded sensibility, that has that deeper knowledge and can vibrate at that higher level, that I can begin to influence my everyday self so that I will not be caught up in whatever the drama of the day is.
Yeah.
So that's how I use the altar space. So, and this comes about in the creation of it. So you give it your intent when you're creating the altar space. So for instance, in this particular environment that we're doing at the Open Center, we're going to be starting with a self-cleansing. So what happens, you come into the room and you're carrying your troubles, you're carrying your background thoughts, you're carrying whatever energies you might have picked up. So we're going to take some time to, at the beginning, to cleanse that. I'm going to be using some of the curandera traditions of doing that, though we won't be using smoke, we'll be using scented scented sprays and stuff to cleanse ourselves and to really cut the ties to some of the negative energy that we might come into.
Right.
And then we want to center ourselves into that sacred core of who we are. And we do that with a little bit of breathing and meditation. And then from there, we go to contemplate what we want to bring as an intent to our altar. So maybe it might be, I need a space that's going to bring peace, to be a portal for me to bring a sense of peacefulness. Somebody might want to, I just really want a space where I can feel that connection to the divinity that I practice. So people could bring their own practice, whatever it might be, whether it's Christian or Jewish or Aboriginal or whatever it is. You want to connect to the thing that you're already connected to and know. So if you have a sensibility, if you have a sort of a heartfelt connection to a certain tradition, then you should honor that tradition. I wouldn't necessarily move to a tradition that I know nothing about in building my altar. I would stick with the tradition that I either know or feel a heartfelt connection to.
Well, it's supposed to represent who you already are.
Yeah. So in a way, when we center ourselves, it helps us to connect to that part of our spiritual being that has a much broader scope of who we are in our life, in our lives, in multiple realities, and can sort of hone in on that symbol that would help us to bridge that gap. And so that's kind of what the altar space is for me. And so we would create a sacred space through the way we put it together, and the care and the honoring that we're putting into it, and we're building it with that intent, and the intent flows into the energy of the building of it. And then we add the symbols that will hold that energy for us. And then it becomes a portable altar that we can take home, put at the bedside. Maybe you want to open it up and do your affirmations before sleep and close it up. Or maybe you want to take it to the office and open it up in the mornings when you get there, and you want to, instead of being so completely dispersed into that environment, you want to take a few minutes to center yourself, to reconnect to who you truly are, so that you don't get into the office space and get sort of disintegrated by the energies there.
Well, I mean, very clearly, you're one of the things that happens in jobs is that sometimes people live in certain kinds of fear, even abuse at certain points, and you don't feel yourself, you're under a ton of stress. But it's making me feel like if there is something like an option of an altar, which just looks decorative in your office, in a nice little, on top of next to flowers with maybe a glass of water and a little candle, that you know what that purpose is. And in some way, it's kind of a protective way of actually being in that job, because a lot of people actually suffer and they can't, they don't feel safe in any way. This would be a very nice option because it's a personal thing. People just think, it's a nice little way that you have your office, but they don't necessarily have to understand what you're doing with it. It's just...
Right, they don't. People don't have to understand, or they can. Either way, it's fine. But what it's doing, it's a small personal space that helps you to support your highest energies, the vibration that will be able to support and sustain you, and also the connection to that part of you that has the insight and the inspiration and the wisdom. So if say you're at work and you're going into a board meeting or some kind of meeting, and you're pretty worried about it, or you're aware that it can be competitive and contentious, you don't want to go into that space in a state of fear.
Yeah.
You want to go to that space from a state of feeling connected to your power. And so you can have this altar as a way of focusing though it's an external cue, the objective of it is to allow you to focus within yourself to the higher power within you, so that that can be present in your moment. So it's really a tool that you could do without. You could do it without the altar, but the altar is the way of support to focus and sustain your innate sacred power, so that when you're going into a situation, if you're in that connected space, however contentious it might be, you can look at it from the perspective of the observer and say, okay, this person just insulted me, and this person is competing, and this person is that, but I don't need to actually be reactive to any of that. What I need to do is to reach into myself and pull out my pearl of wisdom and allow them to then respond to me. So it gives you a different space to function from. It's actually
very protective.
So it is protective in the sense that it protects you from being the wagging tail to everybody else's energy and thoughts and manipulations, and it allows you to stay in your center. Yep. So that you could say, well, I see what's happening. I don't have to get mad about it. I don't have to react to it. I don't have to fight it. I could just find inside myself what is the best and reasonable thing for me to say, to do, and to interact within this situation. And what happens is when you're in your center, now this is just basic spiritual interaction in any case. The tool of the altar just helps you to stay focused into that space and not get pulled out of yourself. But when you're in that central space, then you're in alignment with synchronicity. You're in alignment with intuition. You may say something or present something that you don't even really know why, but you may be saying something that's going to connect on a more visceral, subconscious level to the people around you. And ultimately, when you're in a situation that you're not being manipulated, you're going to garner more respect. You may lose your job. Okay, I'm not saying that it saves
you. Or somebody else may.
Or somebody may. I'm not saying that it saves you from ultimate kinds of consequences, but you should know that if it ends up with your position changing because you're connected, it means that you're only preparing for the next best thing. So there's a level of fearlessness in being able to operate as a centered being. And the altar, to me, is a little bit like the centerpiece of focus and the armor of that space. To be able to remind yourself of your own inner power. So the altar isn't the thing with the power. The power is yours.
Right.
The altar is what reflects back to you what you're capable of and what your spiritual powers are. So it's a reflection.
The way I'm seeing it, because it's coming to me that way, is that if that is something that is set up from a spiritual point of view, all kinds of things are going around in the workplace most often. And many people are sometimes fighting, tearing somebody down, whatever it is that they're doing. But sometimes what happens is when somebody's that centered, everybody sort of wonders, but they feel good towards you. Mm-hmm. They feel good about you, and they don't feel necessarily
threatened.
Right. So they feel safe. And in that respect, it's protective.
It is protective, and then you could find yourself becoming the counsel.
Yeah.
The person that people come to seek out balance. Yeah. When you're in that environment in a balanced state. And that is what I considered and what I have experienced overwhelmingly. But what it also will do is you become a much brighter light.
Right.
So you can also attract negativity because
it needs light.
Purposeful negativity will be very agitated by a bright light. So you might need to use it, have it as a protective tool in that regard.
Well, I also wanted to ask you something else in reference to that, because the other altars that I experience, of course, are, and I've gone to other people's home and even in my home, to do with ancestral. Someone has passed away. Mm-hmm. Several people have passed away. Their pictures are on the altar, and it's a specific altar that has to do basically not for you, for yourself, but this is a specific one to do with the memory of, to keep interacting with that spirit, to keep the memory of, and because we're all lineage, we all, continue on. We don't stop, really.
Well, that's true, and I think that, anybody who has a mantle space or a bookcase top where they put their pictures of their family and relatives and ancestors, you could say that that's an altar.
Yeah.
And it's simply, there are different ways to do it. There's a way of just honoring your ancestors, in the sense you're saying, this was somebody in my family lineage who was important to me and my family. I honor them and the contribution they made to who I am as a being. So it's an honoring.
Yes, and
altar.
I think that they come and help you.
I think that they will and can come and help you if they are acknowledged.
Yeah.
I do recommend that if people, to me, that is just can be done and is a natural interaction in spirituality. You don't have to do anything special.
Right.
But if you are endeavoring to actually contact and ask for help, you need to be more careful.
Well, that I don't know. Generally,
generally you would have people that you know and love, and your spirit is connected to them, and their spirit is still now a guiding force in your life. Right. And I think that's the recognition.
Yeah, there's all kinds of altars that I've heard about. There's the feminine altar, fertility altars, love altars, abundance altars. So it's a matter of what is important to you, what's most important to you, and what do you want to concentrate on. So however you want. It also reminds me of something else. It reminds me of the fact that most churches, that's their base. And it's not like you're taking the church with if you're a religious person, but this is a spiritual perspective. The churches are basically, man-made, run-made, whatever. But it's up to you, your spirituality, how you're going to continue it when you leave that church. And this is, I think, a great way to achieve that. Now, you, on the other hand, because I want to read a little bit of what you're going to be doing. You're going to be talking about the portable sacred altar and how to turn your environment to a sacred space according to your desire or intent. Now, in the class, you're building a bridge to the source, either of angels, spirit guides, or your ancestors. And you're going to be also concentrating on the winter solstice because the date is going to be December 7th. So you're going to be very near to the time. And you want to make sure that you help people, whoever comes in, if they feel that they have a certain tradition, you should bring it with you. Perhaps you have objects that you want to bring that you want to work with during the class. And that way you'll establish a more unique solstice tradition. Make one for yourself. So you can basically understand how to experience in reflection, rebirth, renewal on your own. You necessarily don't always have to attend big groups, but some people feel more powerful that way. Or if you can't, this is the way to go. Now, you're going to have choices of what people can buy as far as, I think there are two choices of the different types of altars, and they're basically small or medium.
Yeah, it's based on size. One is quite compact, it's small, and the other one is a more medium size. But think in terms of it's smaller, half a cigar box maybe would be the kind of the medium size. It wouldn't be a full cigar box, it would be half.
But it comes with many things. It's not just an actual empty altar.
No, that just provides, it's a hinged wood box, and that's the basis of it. But I've been working on putting together all of the complements to that. So you'll receive that, plus you'll receive a bundle from nature, which is to provide for the various elements of nature. You'll have a bundle of some basic small crystals,
Like
so that
crystals,
so that you'll
florals,
be able to
shells.
so you'll be able to work with that, plus fabrics to
great.
choose from. So we could build the altar so the fabrics could be to lay over or within it, or we could actually, make it a part of the altar by attaching it, gluing it together. And so you're going to have a very beautiful decorative piece that is in harmony with the cultural influence of your choice. So if you're interested in American Aboriginal, so you might want to connect with fabric and scents and materials of that traditions from that part of the world. If you want to connect with the more the traditions of the African continent, then you might want to connect more with those kinds of fabrics and scents, and maybe cowrie shells rather than another kind of thing
Right.
from the Americas. If you want to connect with the European influence, then you would want to look for those kinds of traditional pieces as the basics for the decoration of the altar. But the way we're doing the altar building is really through intent. So you want to have the connection to that which you resonate, because that's what will call that energy to you. But if you want it to be a specifically ancestral altar, you would need to put some remembrance there. Now, it could be a photo. It could be just a person's name that you want to put within it, or an old object of that person. You could put that in it.
Could be a watch.
If it's somebody that you're really wanting to reestablish a beautiful connection that you've already had, or if you want to reestablish a connection deeper into your roots, you might want to look for those people who know what tribal groups they're from, either in the Americas or in the African continent. You might want to bring some memento of that tribal group so that you can make that deeper connection. So or if you want to connect to a particular religious belief that you're a practicing person of. You practice Buddhism, so you might want a Buddha there. If you're practicing Christianity, you might want a symbol or an image of Yeshua there. If you're practicing a certain tradition of the continent, the African continent, you might want, one of those orishas. You might want some symbol there, so that it will take you and give you that essence of influence. But I suggest that people who do that do it with some knowledge, that they know that that's what they are believing in and are practicing and are making that connection to something that they understand.
Well, yeah.
So I think I would recommend that. And so it's a part of, as we're bringing the intent to it, we're writing those intentions into the box, into the energy, and we're selecting items that are going to hold and manifest that energy. So if it's peace you want to bring into your life, then you would seek out those symbols of peace, or maybe a gemstone, a particular gemstone that resonates with you. But really, the stones will take on the intent that we bring to it. That's what they do.
Are you also going to talk about, I didn't even think about this just now, with altars, sometimes people desire mantra, desire just a prayer, because it seems to keep them focused in a certain way.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely an option. Or I refer to it as an affirmation of some kind. So you could have put that right into the roof or the top, the inside of the top of your altar, and you'll have those words there that you can read. So that's part of the building in the intent. So what I like to do is how you clear yourself and you write your intentions for the year.
Yeah.
So we're going to be writing that with the intentions we want to manifest, and put that into the base of the altar. And then cover it with something, a fabric or a paper, decorative paper, and it's just going to be there. The energy of it is there. So, but if you want something to repeat, you can put that into the top, so that when you open it, you see the words that you want as your affirmation.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. we're going to have this happen on Friday, December the 7th from 7 to 10. So put this on your calendars. Set aside the time. I think it's also something that you could possibly also even give as a gift.
Well, see, that's the thing. That's why because we were thinking of doing it a bit earlier, and we decided that it would be nice to do it during the solstice, because it is that time of renewal. Mm-hmm. And it is that time of generosity and giving. So you could build the altar as a gift, or you could invite someone in as a gift for them to come in and build their own altar. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of sharing that love. You might want to build into that altar your love, an expression of your love for another person, or your expression of hope and healing for another person. Mm-hmm. So if you have someone who is struggling in life, you could make this as an offering. Here's, take it to the hospital and say, I'm offering you this, my hope towards your healing. And if the person wants and accepts it, you can leave it, and they can have that as a source of vibration as well to uplift their energy.
Yeah, one of the things is that I am used to this just because growing up, I was only there for 5 years in Central America before I came to the U.S. But I saw the altar when I was a child. And one of the things that I learned about it was this is a form of me understanding how to manifest something in my life. Mm-hmm. Because I learned how to communicate with spirit, and eventually that conversation that I have with spirit helps me go in that direction. So it is has a goal-setting aspect to it, that it's not just something that is static. It's not just sitting there. It actually has movement. It has a life. It has it's energetic. It's crossing several planes.
It is expanding. It's expanding our dimensional reality. In consciousness. It really does allow us to be conscious as we expand into the fullness of our own being. I'm very focused on understanding from the perspective of self-connection to source. Mm-hmm. So it's not about reaching into some other realm for somebody to help you. Mm-hmm. It's self-empowerment that I work with.
Well, it's tangible, because as humans, you do need to have something in front of you to actually see it. At least mm-hmm. I do.
It helps. And it helps us to focus and refocus. So it's so easy to be distracted. Mm-hmm. There's so much in our world that does distract us. So it's a very powerful tool in that regard.
So if you go to the Open Center website, which is www.opencenter.org, or you can register through there, or you could and you'll see the write-up there on the page when you put in Kathryn Davis. And then also, you can also call the Open Center at 212-219-2527.
You can go to the website, opencenter.org, and you'll be able to register there. Or you can connect with me directly, heartofmindradio at gmail.com, and you can learn more there.
Yeah, definitely. And, the following week, we're having Rock.
So who is Rock?
Okay.
Tell people.
So Rock grew up in, my problem is that I don't know how to say his name, but he grew up in California, and he had nothing. He was in the projects, and it was a difficult life as he was growing up. A African-American man who decided, I am going to focus myself and become someone. I cannot let my surroundings become me. I have to become and go beyond my environment. And that's exactly what he did. It basically became the guy who walks into corporations now, and he assesses all their problems, and he says, this is what you have to do to get on track. He is brilliant, and he now works on the Upper East Side. He wrote a book on how to leverage discontent in your life and make it work for you. He's so inspirational.
And he's going to be at the Open Center when?
That's right. He's going to be at the Open Center on November 30th. He has a book as well, and the book comes with the price. So it's basically you get a free book and you get an entrance and listen to him talk, and you'll be inspired. You'll love it, and please just listen to him. You'll love him.
And his event is November 30th. And for those of you who want to join me for the Sacred Altar.
That's right.
Portable Sacred Altar.
Remember,
that's December 7th.
December 7th.
A Friday. So hopefully you'll join us for that.
So a week after Rock. And by the way, if you want to look up Rock on the actual website, ROC. I just don't remember his whole name. I'm sorry.
Okay. Next week. Thank you for joining us. Heart of Mind Radio for the new millennium. Check out the website heartofmindradio.com and stay tuned. And now we're going to leave you with a piece of music. After dreaming, Wasas Diop, Just Relax.
Listen to someone gone. Listen to someone gone. Jamunga. In the kingdom, no someone gone. They dance a little nil. Listen to Sawahili man, Sawahili.